Hi, welcome to Quid Pros Quo. I'm Rin.
And I'm Zach.
And today we are talking about Harmon's story cycle, Harmon's plot embryo, Harmon's story circle. It has a lot of names. They all mean the same thing. It's a circle diagram that you can follow around endlessly.
And it's from Dan Harmon, hence why it's called Harmon's story, whatever.
Yes, exactly. So Harmon's story circle has eight phases, I guess you can call them. And it's kind of a spin-off from the hero's journey, but instead of a bajillion plot points like Campbell had, Harmon has like 8 stages, and these are divided kind of in two as an external and an internal stage for each one.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go. Zach, what else do you want to say about introducing the plot embryo?
Just like Rin mentioned, think about this as a condensed version of what's going on with the hero's journey. But it also kind of moves away from the mythic structure that we're used to in some of the epic fantasy or epic sci-fi, whether it's Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Dune. It kind of moves it away from that so that you can use it inside of, a romantic comedy or a sitcom. I don't know why I said the two comedies, but you can use it in a thriller. You can use it in lots of different contexts. And it's a little bit easier to think about it inside of those contexts because you have moved away from the mythic language.
Yeah, the pastoral fantasy type stuff.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, despite doing that, I did do an example of Jack and the Beanstalk, which is a very classic fairy tale that could definitely also be the hero's journey.
Right.
But I've been thinking about the Jack and the Beanstalk a lot because I think I want to do a retelling of it. Haven't decided where I'm going with it yet, but I'm thinking about it, so we're going to talk about it. So, the first phase is the comfort zone, where the external conflict is like not really there yet, and the internal conflict is like they're ignorant and reactive. And in Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack is just living at home with mom and a cow, and everything is fine except then they want something, which is money, because the cow has run dry, and wanting something is the second stage. So mom sends Jack to go and sell the cow for money. Don't tell anyone it's dry. Like, we need to think that they can get milk out of this cow. And so then Jack is put in an unfamiliar situation. In the unfamiliar situation, Jack is presented with a merchant who sells magic beans. And the merchant says, I'll trade you these magic beans for your cow. And this, of course, there's like conflict at home where mom's like, oh, you should not have traded the cow for beans. We needed money and beans aren't going to feed us. But Jack plants the magic beans and it goes into a beanstalk that takes into the land of the giants. And then you get into the adaptation stage, which is the 4th stage if you're counting, where it's unknown and it's chaotic. They may face death. And the internal conflict through all of these has been the same. They're ignorant and reactive. So Jack is adapting to the giant's world. And then you get into the second half of the story cycle. And this is when it's more unknown conflict. One sec. We have a really good diagram that we'll put up because the halves are split up weird, which it shouldn't be because they're just halves. But where the external conflict is still here. I can explain this better. Top half of the circle is the external conflict is familiar, orderly life. It's the known world of the hero's journey. The bottom half is unknown, chaotic death for the external conflict. And it's the unfamiliar world in the hero's journey. Then if you have the vertical halves of the circle, you have your internal conflict, where the first half going clockwise is ignorant and reactive, and the second half is dynamic and proactive. So as we're getting into the second half of the story, I'm doing a lot of talking. Zach, do you want to take over for the second half?
Sure. So in the second half of the story, one of the ways that you can think about this is to cast your mind back like a month and a half ago to think about Freytag's pyramid, where we talked about how when you hit the climax in Freytag's pyramid, it's usually an internal change that leads to the external resolution of the plot. So this second half is taking place after that internal change that is going to propel, in this case, Jack to the end of the story. So after we've finished the adaptation phase, we get to the phase where the character is going to get what they want. So they achieve their goal. Inside of the 4-act structure, this is the false victory phase. In the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, this is where he gets his prize, where it's the golden goose or the harp or, whatever the prize is inside of the giant's house, depending on what version you are reading. But as soon as they get what they want, we move into the next phase. This is the 6th phase, if you're following along on the diagram, which is where the piper comes to collect. Things go wrong. There is some kind of price to be paid for the prize that they get inside of the prior stage. So this is when the giant shows up and chases Jack out of his cloud palace or cloud castle. Now we move back into the return to the familiar. So this is the top half that Rin was talking about when we divided up into quarters. So this is the return flight inside of the hero's journey. We're going back to the place where we started, and we're bringing whatever this thing that we wanted with us in there. So this is when he's climbing down the beanstalk, with the goose or the harp or whatever. And then the last stage is having changed. So there's something different about the character as a result of the journey that they've been through. So in Jack and the Beanstalk, having changed at the beginning of the story, Jack is kind of dumb, not super bright. I just said the same thing twice. Not super courageous. Like, he's not going out and doing things of his own volition. He's not very proactive. Whereas at the end of it, rather than hoping for somebody else to resolve the problem with the giant, he is the one who takes it upon himself to solve the problem, cuts down the beanstalk, and kills the giant in the process. So he has become different.
Absolutely. Great job explaining the second half. When you look at it overall, it is, again, similar to the hero's journey, but you can kind of map onto other things. Like Zach brought in, like, the 4-act structure. You can also bring in Save the Cat, because Save the Cat also has, like, a false victory or a false defeat.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's talk about the pros and cons. So pros is also very simple, and it can focus on not only an external journey, but also internal. So it's not just for fairy tales. It can be used for more complex stories. I've written books based off this that were definitely not fairy tales. But yeah. Zach, you also want to talk about how you can reduce the story cycle to 4 stages, focusing on internal and external states.
Yeah, so one of the ways that you can use the story cycle is through the concept of needs and wants. This is something that I was introduced to actually through the story cycle, the story spine that we talked about last week. But if you're looking at your character having what they want versus what they need, you can kind of divide this out, where in stage 1, they have they have what they want, but they don't have what they need. In the second stage, they don't have either. In the third stage, they have what they need, but not what they want. And then in the last stage, they have what they need and what they want at the same time. So you can break it down into those. You can break it down into those 4 sections, and then it kind of turns into the 4-act structure. But you have added in the external and the internal conflict into your 4-act structure explicitly.
Yes. And it's always a good idea to have conflict in story if you're thinking of Western storytelling. Because like we talked about in the 4-act structure episode, Western storytelling is very dependent on conflict, whereas Eastern storytelling is not so much. So keep conflict in mind if you're writing in the Western world. Finally, the cons is very similar to the hero's journey, which can be very common. And this is not necessarily a con in every sense of the word. This is partly just I was writing these show notes and I'm like, I've seen so many heroes' journeys recently and I am a little bit tired of them. Which is
you need a palate cleanser. You need a palate cleanser every once in a while.
Exactly. So you just need something like new and fresh. maybe not this, but remember, you can do whatever you want with a story structure. Like, the twists you put on it are your own, and that's what makes any of these story structures new and exciting. Well, I think that's all we have to say this week. This has been Quid Pros Quo. See you next week for Romancing the Beat, which is the romance story structure, and I'm so excited for that one. Thanks for listening.
Quid Pros Quo is hosted by DC Winters and CK Jensen. If you like this episode, be sure to leave us a rating. And if you'd like to contact us, you can email us at quidprosquo@gmail.com. For more episodes, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts.